I campaigned for President of the United States because I was the only person qualified, if that is in 1980, 84, 88. I campaigned because I was the only one, to my knowledge, qualified to be president under the conditions which the United States and the world was facing, the special conditions. And that's the only reason I ran. And I ran not necessarily to win, I ran because somebody had to stand up and tell the truth.
Mr. LaRouche, we have a situation that is unique in the world. We find ourselves before the new order. We have never had a situation where all the power, so much power was concentrated in the hands of a single man, as we have in the present case of the President of the United States. We call that new order, the Dominican Republic, neoliberalism. Is there another way? Is there another option? Is there another way we can go outside of that new order?
Absolutely, and we must. If you go back to what used to be the principles upon which Christian civilization was based, which, among other things, prohibited the practice of usury and demanded the right of every family to exist, at least the opportunity to exist, because the production of the nation, the production of the individual, is a function of the family. In a family that cannot exist because of poverty, because of lack of opportunity, because of lack of education, misery, so forth, disease, then the person cannot exist, or the person is crippled, there's a crippled existence, and the nation cannot exist. When man is reduced to desperation, also he tends to become a beast. And when a nation's policy, such as a practice of usury of the type we have today, reduces a nation's desperation, the nation may be destroyed by that desperation. We have always recognized the moral responsibility of the state to provide the conditions of life. The one thing that is not understood is this, which I have laid special emphasis upon. Yes, individual enterprise is correct, but the state must take responsibility for basic economic infrastructure. Because basic economic infrastructure, which is water management, transportation, power generation distribution, public education, public health and hygiene. These are matters which cannot be divided into private entrepreneurships. These are matters of the nation as a whole. But the reason we must, as much as possible, in agriculture, in industry, have private entrepreneurship is because the ability of man to progress is based on the expression of the development of the individual mind, which is sovereign, which cannot be divided. It's an individual. That mind gives us, for example, scientific and technological progress. The existence of man depends upon this progress. Therefore, when we say to an individual, start a business, succeed, we are hoping to use his mind and the mind of his collaborators in that business to make an improvement in production, to create employment, useful employment, for the good of the society. And therefore, we need a form of society which meets these two requirements. No usury, commitment to the social justice of the people as a whole, commitment of the state to foster the development of basic economic infrastructure, and fostering, partly through education, the development of entrepreneurships in successful farmers, particularly family farms, successful small businesses, which may grow to larger businesses because they are good, they're improved. The issue here is that, and I agree with Friedrich Schiller on this point, I think history bears it out, my case bears it out, that there are two tendencies in European civilization over 2.5 millennia. One is typified by Solon of Athens, who banned the usurers from Athens and established a constitutional republic. The opposite view of that time was Lycurgus's Sparta, which was divided into an aristocracy, a nobility, and slaves, helots. That Henry Kissinger and others who are my enemies because they represent the Sparta tradition. Example of the policy issue, which was the motive, actual motive of Kissinger's and others for putting me in prison, is Kissinger's policy, and the policy of his faction, as identified by two documents from the 1974-1976 period, while he was Secretary of State and while he and then Brent Scowcroft were national security advisors to Presidents Nixon and then Ford. The first memorandum is the National Security Study Memorandum 200, signed by Henry Kissinger. The second memorandum, which is based on the first, is National Security Decision Directive 314, but it's signed by Brent Scowcroft in 1975. These memoranda said that developing nations are a danger to the United States because as their populations grow, they will demand technological progress and will become powers which challenge the United States' power to deal with their natural resources and so forth. Well, I opposed that because I was on the opposite side. I agreed with Boumediene of Algeria in 1967. I agreed with Pope Paul VI in Progressio Populorum that the developing nations had a right to technological progress, and it was in the interests of the United States, in fact, that these nations have these rights. So there were two factions. Bush, Kissinger, others, the bankers, New York bankers, belonged to one faction. I belonged to another one. I became, in the course of the 1970s, late 1970s and 1980s, influential in the world through my collaboration with certain agencies of government, including the Reagan administration, the first administration. The people in New York viewed me as a power. Kissinger viewed me as a powerful person and said he must be destroyed. Whether I remain in prison or not is essentially at the pleasure of the president or the presidency. The legal grounds for removing me from prison by removing the sentence, removing the conviction, exist. It could happen within a matter of time. It could happen, as we say under law, sua sponte, by a federal judge. The evidence exists. As to whether that evidence and that procedure will be acted upon will be up to the political pressures acting upon the presidency. I am here because the president wishes me here for no other reason. If the president were to change, then I probably would, the law would be allowed to release me from prison.
What is it that the people who rule the United States today want? What is it that they are seeking in the long term? What is their aim?
Everybody, I won't say everybody, but in general, one has the impression that people are trying to find a rational explanation for the behavior of the government of the United States. That is the mistake, to seek a rational explanation. If you say, what is the irrational motivation? Then we can, very simple, not difficult at all to understand. You have a president who's run by some funny woman in England who flies between London and Washington on her broomstick, Margaret Thatcher. Right? She comes to George Bush. George Bush says, I'm not going to go into a war in the Middle East. She says, George, you're going to go to war. He says, yes, I'm going to go to war. What we're dealing with is we're dealing with ideologues who have utopian ideas, who believe that they must make these utopian ideas come true. They don't care about reality. They say, if we have enough power, we can make anything happen that we wish. We wish to have a one world order which the Anglo-American rule. We wish to have the population reduced. We wish to turn Central and South America and Africa and most of Asia into helots, slaves, and we like that. We like it. That's what we wish to do.
Entonces no hay integración con América Latina, no es cierto.
So it isn't true then that there's enterprise for the Americas of an integration with Latin America and the United States, free trade, North American common market, integration, and the sense you would understand it.
Let me put it in this ironic fashion. I eat a meal. I have a salad before the meal. I have a meat course. If I'm Italian, I have a pasta course before that. I have an after course, a meat course. Then I have maybe one or two different desserts. I have integrated all these elements into my stomach. That is the kind of integration of which these gentlemen speak.